Down under after Australia and New Zealand won their joint bid to host the 2023 Women's World Cup in a vote that ended up at 22-13.
The host country of the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023, which will be Australia. Yeah!
Cheers erupted when the organising committee watched the news online from FIFA in Zurich in the early hours of this morning Australian time. Across the country, people stayed up for the announcement, with Sydney's Opera House and Auckland's Sky Tower lit up in support of the bid. The countries beat out Colombia for hosting rights after Brazil and Japan withdrew from the race in recent days. Matilda's vice-captain, Steph Catley, says it came as a huge surprise.
To be honest, no, I had no idea, and I think that's what made it so scary. It was just that the fact that everyone in that room had worked so tirelessly for 3 years on that bid, and looking around, I was like, I can't handle this if, it goes the other way. I don't want to look these people in the eye, but, being able to, scream and shout and hug them at the end for a winning bid, it was just the best feeling in the world.
And Fiona Crawford is the author of Never Say Die, the 100-year overnight success of Australian women's football. She joins us now from Brisbane. Fiona Crawford, g'day. So you've literally written the book on women's football in Australia. You must be over the moon with this announcement this morning.
A bit like Steph Catley. I couldn't believe it was going to happen until it did happen. And, I mean, how long did it take him to actually announce that? It's like the longest sentence ever. So, yeah. Huge. It was, I don't think anyone is going to be sleeping a lot or thinking about much else other than women's football for the next few days.
Yeah.
So it's like...
But in the end, was there much doubt Australia was going to take it out? Or was it up against Colombia in the end?
You never know. You never know. And given our track record with the Men's World Cup bid, no one was game to be counting it. Obviously, it started to look much better when Brazil dropped out, because they are always a huge rival for us. They're a wonderful football nation. Same with Japan. Japan would have done a phenomenal job of the tournament, and it is a bit of a shame that they did have to drop out because, so very happy for Australia and New Zealand. Sad for the others as well, but nothing was guaranteed until they actually said it.
So even as recently as 15 years ago, would there have been anyone thinking that this day would have been possible? No.
So if you imagine, women have been playing football in Australia for 100 years. The first game was actually held in Brisbane in 1921.
Go Brizzy.
Yeah, it was. It was at the Gabba, which is obviously a stadium we know better for AFL and cricket these days, but it was actually a women's football tournament was held. It was kind of an exhibition match.
And who was the driving force behind things way back then?
It's always been the women, actually. Yeah. They've sort of played in spite of not having access to facilities, to funding, to wages. It's been, there was, the UK essentially tried to ban football, and there was some influence here in terms of that as well. So women were traditionally pushed towards more quote-unquote feminine games like hockey and Vigoro, which is a bit of a cross between cricket and I think lacrosse. So women have played football in Australia in spite of being encouraged to play other sports.
And so, were there some particularly strong female figures and personalities behind it back there in 1921?
Yeah, there were. There were teams started in Toowoomba. They were quite informal. It was started in Brisbane and Ipswich as well. And then the players who played in the exhibition matches were sort of selected from those. There was such a novelty, though, and there was such huge interest in it. 10,000 people turned up to that first game, that it was actually quite intimidating for some of the women as well, because it was, huge attention when you're still trying to learn the game.
And so how did the game progress then in Australia over the decades?
So there were some really dedicated women whose names you would have heard probably in recent times. So Moya Dodd, who was actually co-opted to the FIFA Executive Committee. There were players like Heather Reid, who were administrators, who, without much funding, but with a lot of passion for the game, made it possible for lots of women to play, whether that was Queensland and New South Wales were quite strong. Victoria got a little bit stronger in recent decades as well, and they would play national titles. They would all come together and compete once a year.
And what's the situation now with players? Is it like with people who are in the W League, What percentage of them play soccer and earn money from soccer, and how many of them have other jobs and have to sustain themselves with other jobs?
Yeah, so if you think back as recently as 2014, Katrina Gorry, one of the Matidas, was named the best female footballer in the whole of Asia. And she was flown to a black tie ceremony that was held in the Philippines. But in the space of 24 hours, she went from that black tie ceremony to coming back to working as a casual in a cafe. And it was literally a case of you could be the best female footballer in Asia and still not earn enough money to cover your wages. The Matidas achieved pay parity in November 2019, and that's how recent it was. They're still ahead of many female footballing federations as well, like the US is actually having to sue their federation over pay.
Wow. And just taking a look at the history over the long period that you have, are you struck by the fact that they're still fighting so fiercely for the basics even now? Yeah,
I mean, at grassroots facilities, lots of them don't actually have female change rooms. Even at an A-League and a W-League level, when there was a double header, so both men and women playing sort of back-to-back, if there was only one set of change rooms, they would give the men the change rooms and set up tents for the women in the car park. And that's not to say that, you know, the men's teams haven't been supportive, but it's always been a case of men's football is the default. And this is actually the first time we'll see that the women's game is going to be the main game. And that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, and how excited are you about the younger generation who are going to witness this, get excited about the game and inject the game with even more talent over the coming decade or so in particular?
Yeah, so the visibility is so important. Until a couple of years ago, you literally could not watch a Matidas game. Or if you did, it was maybe they'd show one, but they wouldn't show the whole World Cup. Or all of the games that they're playing. This is the first time that everyone will actually be able to follow the team the entire time, and they'll be able to support it. And I think the saying that if you can't see it, you can't be it is so accurate.
Yeah. And I'm just interested to hear your take on the kind of, because recent with the World Cup last year, there was that kind of big coaching drama before it, and there was a lot of controversy around that and apparent division. Where is the team at now in terms of, how would you sum up what happened there, and where is the team at now in terms of cohesiveness and focus?
Yeah. That remains one of the mysteries. I have been waiting for the information to come out and it hasn't. Perhaps we'll never know. I think the team is actually in a good place and they're really focused on the future. I will be curious to see who will be coaching the team going into the World Cup, because Ante Milicic was only ever brought in as a short-term coach. And one of the challenges in women's football has always been that the default coach is a male coach, and there's been a lot of women who are tremendously talented coaches who just haven't had an opportunity, or there hasn't been a coaching career path for them to follow. That's something that really needs to be rectified in women's football and is starting to be. So I'm hopeful that for 2023 we might actually see some more female coaches coming through the ranks.
Yeah. And so how soon will that decision be made?
I think it's when his contract is up, and I think they had extended it for some time. So yeah. Well, I will be following that one closely, but I'd say it would be in the next 12 months or so.
And so where are the Australians ranked at the moment, and what's your tip on where they're going to end up in 2023 at the end of the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, so they're now firmly a top 10 team, if that makes sense. They have been hovering around 6th place. That said, I don't want to put undue pressure on them. The European teams have invested heavily in women's football in recent years, and we saw the fruition of that in the 2019 Women's World Cup. I mean, Italy was really tough. The Netherlands ended up making it to the finals. So I do think they will be very competitive. My heart says, yeah, absolutely, we could win it. But honestly, I think Australia's just going to fall in love with women's football. So wherever they end up, it's going to be a phenomenal
I
tournament.
think they kind of already have. You get the impression over the past couple of years that the Matidas are the favourite national team. That's a kind of a term that's been floating around a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, they have. They've actually been named, Australia's favourite team. I think in recent days, the Australian women's cricket team. So it's a bit of they're hovering in between, and they're both up there. Yeah, there's so much heart to women's football. There's a richness to it, and I think it's because they've had to overcome so many obstacles to actually be able to play. Australia's not going to know what's hit them in 2023. It's going to be all about women's football.
Yeah, and we can so tell that you share that heart and that passion. Fiona Crawford, thanks so much for talking to us on such a wonderful day for women's sport in Australia.
Thanks for having me.
Fiona Crawford there in Brisbane. And Tracy Holmes is hosting a special program tonight on Australia and New Zealand's winning bid for the 2023 Women's World Cup. You can see that at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time tonight on the ABC News channel.